Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I am here with the team behind Death Meets Lisolette, who are Ryan Bennett and Guy Jenkin. Ryan produced and Guy wrote and directed it. As always, we're going to proceed as though everyone's seen it so that we can talk about spoilers and all the rest of it without worrying about it. But just to recap for anyone else, Death Meets Lisolette is about a little girl whose grandmother has kind of ongoing Alzheimer's. It's getting worse and she's worrying about it, and Lisolette happens to realise that the Grim Reaper has been locked in a barn, and as a result no one in her community is dying, and she sees an opportunity to negotiate a better settlement for her grandmother than she might otherwise get. And it's a very light-hearted and warm and sensitive take on euthanasia. So Guy, why don't we kick off with, I know the story kind of came from you, it's a personal thing. How did it originate?
It came from my mum, who did have dementia. She'd been a nurse. She started off as a 16-year-old in the Blitz, so she'd seen a lot. And she saw a lot of people with various forms of dementia and Alzheimer's. And she always said to us, if ever I get that, I just want to die. I don't want to go have that long decline. And of course, she ended up getting it, but you don't realise it. It creeps up on you. And she spent a long time with it, until the point that she didn't know any of us. And I think we all felt kind of rather powerless, that we could do nothing to do what she had wanted. So, I mean, this all sounds very serious, but the idea came from that. And I think what I wanted to do was something that wasn't sort of very on the nose, I think something she would have liked to watch, basically. So, I mean, I tried to deal with that whole issue through a sort of modern fairy tale.
And how did you and Ryan meet? How did that kind of partnership come together?
Should I answer that? Yeah.
Well, we take it in turns.
So Guy was introduced to me by a colleague of mine when I was working at Lionsgate, and Guy had made his feature film What We Did on Our Holiday with Lionsgate, and so knew a man called Nick Manzi very well there. And I'm not sure the conversation exactly between Guy and Nick, but Nick came to me one day and said, Guy Jenkin, master comedy writer and brilliant director, wants to do a short film. I think you got to do it because this opportunity doesn't come very often. And I was like, oh, okay, great. He knew that I'd produced a few short films whilst I was also working at Lionsgate. So he was basically the one who made it impossible for me to say no. And then Guy and I met and we talked about the idea, and obviously I really loved it. And strangely, the first short film that I ever produced was also about voluntary euthanasia, but it was very serious, heavy drama about a woman who has to tell her grandson she's going to Switzerland to die. So this one was way more appealing to me, I think, after that experience, just because of how light touch it was with the topic, and how it kind of took a bit of took the magical elements of the story and made it just more memorable, I think, in that sense.
Yeah, I think what you need with any project is to find someone who's a great enthusiast for it, and Ryan was certainly that, so it was great when we started working together, and he took it to the Uncertain Kingdom. And
how long was it cooking before it came to the Uncertain Kingdom?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think months, probably about 6 months, I would say. Obviously there aren't that many opportunities out there for short films to be funded. They're few and far between, and generally with the public funders. So, Guy and I were kind of working on the script, and we were sort of working out how we do it and our sort of time frame. Obviously, I had a full-time job. Guy's busy doing all the other projects he's working on. So I think we were stewing with it for maybe about 6 months, and then we heard about the Uncertain Kingdom, and obviously that process took a few months after that. So it was a decent size of time, yeah.
Yeah. And how, Guy, did the experience of going from doing what we might call, proper stuff, TV, feature film, and then suddenly being on a short, what was that like?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've worked a lot with Andy Hamilton, and we've done quite a few things that are kind of on a wing and a prayer. Very, made topical political comedies that are shot and edited and go out on the same day, and written on the same day, and stuff like that. So I have liked working, on just with a very light, dedicated crew, where everybody does a little bit of everything. I mean, in fact, the pilot for Outnumbered, I mean, which was a sitcom on BBC One that Andy and me made.
In case you needed any other introduction to that program.
I mean, it was initially turned down, and so Hat-Trick said they'd put in half to make a pilot, and we shot for 3 days in my house with, very little crew. I think I was sort of director, art director, and props or something. I don't know, but everybody did a little bit of everything. So it wasn't that unfamiliar an experience. And I mean, it's doing stuff like that is very enjoyable, because I think it's more less about the sort of Leviathan, the machine that comes with a really big project, and more about the essence of it, about the acting and the content and and again, I mean, Ryan did a terrific job at making very little go a very long way.
Can you talk about that, Ryan? Like, what were the challenges for you?
Yeah, it was, I think, mainly the fact that we shot the film on an island 2 hours outside of London. That was pretty challenging. When both of us are based in London and the budget is not that great. Well, I mean, it's great, but it's not that long.
It's all right. It's not a lot.
Then taking not a small size crew down to an island and putting them up for a couple of nights, and then and all of the kind of standard things that you have to account for when you're making a short. I think I think that the fact that we're on an island in the middle of nowhere, that became quite difficult. At one point we were shooting on a wildlife reserve it took 15 minutes to drive from the entrance of the wildlife reserve to our location, because you had to crawl at 5 miles per hour with all the kit, with all your people, and make sure to not disturb the cows and the birds and everything. It was,
Don't run over any rare ducks or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was.
Plus,
also,
it was a heat wave.
Oh my God, the heat wave! I forgot about the heat wave.
Yeah, no, it's always good, because we will always remember where we were on Britain's hottest day ever.
Yeah.
So
It's true.
It's funny because you see a lot of British seaside towns on film, and obviously they look like British seaside towns, and they're a bit grey and grizzly, and the weather normally does a lot to kind of create the mood. Where with ours, it just felt like the one day of the year where it feels, I don't know, like an otherworldly kind of place. Like you don't see that weather. And like Guy said, it was the hottest day on record in Britain.
Yeah.
The heat wave. Guy, at one point, Guy was walking around with his cap and an ice pack underneath his cap, and we had to switch it around every sort of 10 minutes because it was just heating up way too quickly. The costume that the guys wore were, quite bulky jackets, and Cornell John, who's in the film, he was wearing a jumper, and between takes he was suffering. But
we did on the recce for it, or well, a couple of recce's, but certainly the first time I saw it, there were these wonderful kind of brooding skies, these big dark clouds rolling in. It looked fantastically dramatic. And I thought, oh, if it gets like that, it'll be great. And of course, we have brilliant blue skies, and I mean, we shouldn't complain. It could have been, it could have been a storm that we couldn't shoot in.
Yeah,
but it certainly meant we had to kind of adapt to a very different look as we went along.
Yeah, it doesn't have the like Grim Reaper, edge of the world kind of feeling. It ended up being like, oh wow, look at that, let's go to the beach kind of look. But it worked for the sunniness of the film.
Do you know, at one point we were driving back to the place we were staying, and this thunderstorm came out of nowhere, and it was like, okay, grab the kit, get everyone ready, I'm not going to sort of spoil, there's some filmmaking tricks that we used because we didn't have Hugh Dennis at that point to play Death, so we had a stand-in who shall remain nameless, but let's just say he's on this Zoom call right now, who stood in for Death at the drop of a hat, because of that. We needed to kind of capitalize on that shift of weather.
Yeah.
You'll see that at the moment, kind of where he walks across.
Yeah,
Go on, Guy. Sorry.
I was saying I had promised somebody else that they could be Death at that point, but as there was a lightning storm and Death was carrying a large metal sickle, I thought that I can't really let someone else.
Yeah, you can't outsource that. You've just got to take
no,
that.
And talking about outsourcing as well, when Guy and I were developing the script, we were sort of talking about how we can kind of get on screen without involving loads of stunts, how we can get the idea that people around the town are kind of flirting with death and getting themselves into situations where they might be, for example, falling off a ladder, off a roof, or lots of different scenarios where they could be flirting with death. And we decided it might be funny to see someone emerging from the sea with a suit and a big breeze block around them, kind of suggesting that there'd been some kind of mafia hit, or kind of like, not explained, but suggested. And then we kind of realized, who are we going to ask to do this? Who would be who would volunteer to jump into the sea, splash around a bit in the sand, and then emerge with a breeze block around them? And that was the very first shot of the very first day. And obviously, Guy took that one for the team, being Death in a lightning storm, and I took it for the team, and I was the guy emerging from the sea. So literally the first thing we did on the first day was me get into a suit, jump into the sea, splash around, and then and come back out.
That's producing though, isn't it? You're just, especially on shorts, you just have to just step up, just get on with it.
Yeah, and we thought that would be the first shot. So I obviously did that, jumped to the sea, got all wet, got all mucky, and then kind of got back to where we were shooting, and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And the AD that we had, Reese, who was brilliant, decided that we'd push that shot till about 11 o'clock. This is 9 o'clock. Yeah. So I'm now standing in a real sandy, horrible suit, drying up because it's so hot. So I eventually have to get back in the sea. Yeah.
Lovely.
Don't you wish that as an executive producer you'd come to visit us? Because we'd
have
found a very interesting role for you, I'm sure.
My experience visiting, I only visited a couple of sets, and I still regret not going to more. It never worked out for various reasons, and obviously they were shooting all around the country. It was a bit of an unjustified expense, but every time it was just like, oh, this is such a nice experience. I mean, it wouldn't have happened with you guys, thank God I didn't visit you, but you just go and you just sort of swan in and sort of see everyone, and then you go again and you don't take on any of the stress. But I mean, I know if I'd have gone to you guys, I would have been in the film in some mad scenario, presumably. Can you talk a little bit, Guy, about working with cast that you do have those great relationships with? How does that work? Is there a shorthand? Not really. Are you giving notes? Are you improvising? What's it like?
Well, a lot of the cast I had worked with before, and I mean, for something like this, you need not only brilliant actors, but actors I think who are just going to be able to turn up and do it, because there isn't an option for rehearsal. There's very little option for rehearsal when you get there. We don't have very much time, and certainly there were a terrific cast in that respect. And yeah, I suppose there is a sort of shorthand with people like Andy and Hugh and Roz, who I've worked with a lot over the years. And it was very interesting working with Harriet Turnbull, who played Lisolette, because the last time I'd worked with her, she'd been 3, and on the film we shot up in Scotland, and of course acting at that age is sort of just being yourself. But of course now she's 8 years older, 7 years older. Anyway, but of course now she's a proper actress, and she was terrific. Rather than sort of just not telling her what the scene was really about and just letting her be, you're giving her quite complex notes, and she's taking them, and so she sort of turned from being brilliant at one sort of acting into another. So that was nice to see. I mean, we because the process of casting children takes so long, because you've got to really get to know them, you've got to sort of trust them, not to be sort of thrown when you get on the set and things like that. We did decide to make Lisolette a little bit older so we could work with Harriet again, because we knew just how good she was.
Yeah,
I think Harriet was the person that I think we cast her first of all the ensemble. She was the first person. Yeah, and as Guy alluded to, that was the most difficult kind of casting choice, and we're grateful that that Harriet was available for us.
Do you have any tips on directing children? Because obviously, as they always say, don't work with kids and animals. Is there anything specific that works for kids that you think just doesn't translate for adults?
Yes, I mean, as I say, with Harriet, in a way, she's now almost an adult actor. But with children, I think the thing to, what Andy and I worked on before we did stuff with children, was to just think of all the things that would annoy them or put them off on a set. So we didn't have a first at all. We did so there's nobody, sort of no big man in a puffer jacket shouting. We had the cameras running when they turned up on set. We had no makeup, and we made sure they didn't learn the script. We kept the script away from them, and then just told them the lines. One of us would go away and tell them the lines, 2 minutes before the scene started, and so that they sometimes put it in their own words. And there's just a sort of naturalism about them. Yeah. But also, kind of light whole areas, so that we had to do a sort of trailer for Outnumbered once, where a DOP who wasn't ours was telling the children to find their light and things like that, which doesn't really work with 4 and 6 year olds.
No, not so much. Not so much.
So we had a great DOP who just lit areas that they could kind of ramble around.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. We've had a question come in. I'll just open it up and read it. Oh, it's Izzy. The film tackles such a hard subject to talk about so brilliantly and makes it so accessible. Have you shared it with any right to die organisations, and do you plan to? It seems an excellent starting point for extremely difficult conversations that many are so fearful of.
I'll probably answer that question. So we at one point, when we were sort of working out where the home for this film was going to be in that kind of development process, I had taken it to a sort of financier who had lots of ties to charities, and the main reason why they would have financed it would be so that they could do some kind of charity activation around it. But from many reasons, the fact that it came into the Uncertain Kingdom being kind of the primary one, we didn't necessarily need that financier, and therefore we didn't, I guess we were sort of so wrapped up with the production that we didn't really lean into that into the charity or awareness angle. But that's certainly not to say that we wouldn't share it with organisations dedicated to that cause now. I think it'd be actually a really good idea. So thanks, Izzy, for that suggestion. When I made the film that I mentioned earlier, the serious drama about sort of Dignitas and euthanasia in Switzerland, we did work with their kind of film reps there, and got a bit of a profile through that. But there's definitely more scope for this one to work well with them. So yeah, something I'll work on and explore, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. When you think about people seeing the film, what did you hope that they would take away from it?
Well, I suppose what I would like is that it's a film that entertains and makes people laugh, but also raises a really difficult subject. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for dealing with difficult subjects with comedy. You know, I've always thought it's something that the British do particularly well, which is, you know, sort of tread that razor edge between something very serious and something you know, genuinely funny, because I think that's sort of, well, that's closest to life. I mean, you know, you go to a funeral, but invariably end up with people really laughing at something that's said or something there. So I don't know. I mean, you know, I hope it does. It does make people conscious of the issue while entertaining them. I mean, it's a you know, it's a shame that Corona got in the way of these films going out to the sort of town halls and local groups. And I mean, I don't know if there's still any possibility of that.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
At a future date. You see, that would be great, I think.
Yeah.
You know, all these films, you know, there's some other ones that are terrific films about issues. I mean, nearly all of them are.
Yeah.
But you know, to go out into local communities, let them choose those films that think that are most relevant to them, and then have people talk about them afterwards would be great.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, Georgia, but I think that I think that approaching the topic in a way that isn't preachy at all. I think the idea of this kind of magical death type character somehow, and quite slapstick, like being locked away in a bar, it's so kind of silly and light and flippant that it's not preachy in any way, and the message is a bit more nuanced and a bit more kind of subtle, and it doesn't basically tell you how to kind of approach your own opinion about what the rights and wrongs of euthanasia. So I think that for me was one of the biggest draws, is that it starts a conversation, but it certainly doesn't give you the opinion that it wants, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're coming to the end of our time, so I really like ending on this. Whether there's anything that the experience of making the film actually gave you, more than, you know, not just thinking about what it might give audiences, but what you took away from it, whether that's a practical filmmaking lesson or a more general lesson.
Do you want to answer that first, Guy?
Well, I was hoping you were going to go first on that.
I've got
that's a hard one.
I've got a seed of an idea that I might say. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, just so The Uncertain Kingdom, obviously, because of the inbuilt kind of theatrical distribution plan that you guys had right from the start, I've never had a short that was going to sort of be distributed widely. So I think that the whole infrastructure around rights and clearances and things like that, it's kind of boring for anyone who's watching. But rights and clearances is just from doing a normal short film that's going to go onto Vimeo or do film festivals, whatever, that's one level. But when you intend to do a short for theatrical distribution, there's a whole world that you have to think of. So that was a big learning experience for me, and I really, really hope that another financier or company or whoever it is invests in short films like you guys have, because Corona really, it was a great shame about missing out on the theatrical experience, because this could have done, it could have changed how short films are distributed. And so hopefully someone will be brave enough to give these films, to give short films another chance for theatrical.
No, I think for me, it just kind of distills what filmmaking is about, or making anything. When you sort of work with a very small group of people over a short time span, when a lot of people are donating their time for free, I mean, it just becomes about what it should always be about, which is the creative process. And it seems to cut out a lot of the bollocks that you get at either end of sort of vast numbers of people kind of wanting to change it into what they want it to be, or changing it for the wrong reasons, the sort of long painful pre-productions and so on. So I think it's great that you can concentrate on just mostly the creative process.
Yeah, liberating.
Yeah.
Well, that is our time. I just wanted to say on the theatrical thing, just because it is still current for us, the original release obviously was cancelled, but for anyone interested at home in potentially watching films in the cinema or in a shared space when we're allowed again, we are still pursuing that, because we do feel that as much as the online release has been amazing and we've seen a lot of conversation happening around them, there is something, as we're all missing so desperately at the moment, there is something about being in a space with other people inspired by films to talk, and that is what these films were designed to do. And we definitely haven't said goodbye to it, so there could be yet still time for that conversation around Death Meets Lisolette.
And for any film financiers watching or listening, put your money in your pocket and do something similar, because it's a big platform for short filmmakers in the UK.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I will be back tomorrow night with the team behind What's in a Name, the documentary, and a couple of the stars of the documentary as well. But for now, bye-bye. Thank you very much, Guy. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, Georgia.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.